I looked out the window and there was a 50 cal pointed directly in my face. I was knee deep in cartel territory and I'd only been home from prison for a few years. And I was asking myself, how'd I get myself in this predicament? But the better question was I going to be able to get out of it? I was in an old Suzuki, 1980s model. No license plate, no air condition, no spare tire. About an hour and a half south of Matamoros, Mexico. And I was with my Mexican friend who asked me to accompany him on a mission. And after counsel and seeking people's advice who advised me not to go because of the possible dangers of cartel, interaction, I didn't listen. I went against sound counsel. They said, if you feel like you got to go, then go. I even asked my wife. She said, whatever you feel like the Lord is leading you to do, that's what you should do. So I went to my friend, my Mexican friend, and I said, I'm going to come with you. And we got in that 1980s model Suzuki, who he had to add water to the radiator before we even started our mission. And I left my entire team behind with my new Mexican friend to head to a part of Mexico that I was warned and advised to avoid because I was going deeper into cartel territory and into imminent danger. Take a walk with me. The last thing I wanted was to end up in jail in Mexico. So I'm staring up at this 50 cal and it's literally aimed right in my face. There's a guy who's standing in the back of an old pickup truck and his 50 cal is literally swiveled in the back bed of the pickup truck on a literal stand with a swivel. And when our Suzuki pulled on side this truck, the man who was in the back bed of that old pickup truck swiveled that 50 cal and pointed it right in my face. My Mexican friend looks at me and says, be calm. Should not be a problem. He said he's only scanning us, seeing what we're about. I didn't say nothing. I just listened and kept looking the dude right in the eye who had the 50 cal pointed in my face, wondering, what am I doing? And am I really going to help anybody today? If I would have been in Burma and I would have stared into his eyes when he had a 50 cal, I wouldn't be alive today to talk about it, because the Burmese don't like to be looked in the eye. But it seems like the Mexican cartels and police, they don't have that much of a problem with you staring them in their eyes. So we get past the stop sign, and the guy with the 50 caliber in the back of the truck just keeps going. And as the truck keeps going, the guy who got the 50 cal aimed at me swivels it back around, and they just keep riding. And I look at my friend and I said, okay, I've already seen the trucks riding around Mexico with the 50 calibers mounted on them. He said, but that's the first time I had one pointed at me. He said, oh, it's no problem. He said, the further deep we get into Mexico, the more we may run into this. He said, most of the police work for cartel. He said, as long as we don't cause no problems, we shouldn't have any problems. What? Let me explain. I was on a missions trip for the church that I went to back home in the States, in Louisiana. And they were going on mission trips, and I felt like after all the years I'd done in prison, the least I could do was get involved in missions to try to help people out after all the bad I had done. And I talked to my wife. I said, hey, would you like to go on a mission trip with the church to Mexico? And she was like, no, not really. My wife wasn't necessarily interested in going on international mission trips, especially to Mexico. Anyway, after much prayer and consideration, we decided to go, and we joined the missions trip. And we had to go through all kind of classes on what to do and what not to do. And when I was there, we met the pastor and his team in Matamoros, Mexico, Well, the pastor's brother just so happened to find out that we were going to be there. And that's when he came, and he spoke little English, enough to get by and left for me and him to communicate on our entire trip, but we couldn't have deep thought conversations. But I had a friend of mine who you'll see in this picture that I'm going to put up with some of the team who I was on this trip with. He was a translator because he's obviously Spanish and he speaks Spanish, but he's not from Mexico, he's from Guatemala. Anyway, we go to Mexico, and one of the things that we always say is you never leave your missions team to go on individual missions. Well, this particular pastor felt like the Lord told him to tell me to come with him to pray for this little small town in the middle of nowhere. And when I told my wife was like, I don't know, that sounds kind of dangerous, right? And then I told the lead, the person who was leading the team that we were on, and he said, Greg, that's up to you. We wouldn't advise it because it's dangerous to go off on your own, and we can't guarantee your safety. Neither could anybody else here. I said, I understand. He said, but you make the decision what's right for you, and if you feel like God wants you to go, then go. We'll pray for you. All right. Now here I am, riding past the 50 cal. And the further we get south from Matamoros, the worse the streets got. The streets were already terrible in Matamoros. They were flooded at the particular time from stagnated water. We literally bought bleach and poured in all the water because the mosquitoes and the gnats were so bad that it was torturing the entire community that we was doing ministry in. And the kids couldn't enjoy playing soccer outside. So we literally bought bleach that they couldn't afford, and we poured bleach all in the stagnant water just to try to kill some of the mosquitoes and gnats, which over the next few days, they diminished a little bit. Anyway, here I am driving in this Suzuki, and I'm looking, and it's becoming more and more rural. And the further we get into Mexico, the more obscure and desolate everything becomes. I don't even remember the town we drove to, but when we got to the particular neighborhood that he was talking about, and you could see the difference too. There was less and less of population, and there was more and more guns with 50 calibers on them. And it went from being police that were driving in these trucks to actually being cartel. He said, no, those are cartel members. And he said, listen, it was hard to tell because he said most of the police were also cartel members. And I'm like, all right, cool. He said, but let's go. So we're driving in this beat up neighborhood. And when we get there, I literally see a man walking down the street with a pair of shorts on, no shoes, no shirt, with a straw hat on and a machete, just walking down the street. I said, what he's doing? He said, oh, he should not be a problem. He said, many people walk around with machetes. Soon enough, right when we made the corner, there was another man walking down the street with a machete. So I'm guessing that people just walk around Mexico with machetes. He said, machetes to Mexicans are kind of like pocket knives to Americans. And I'm like, all right, cool. That makes sense to me. Well, we driving, and I look, and I see like 15 naked kids all in water around a puddle. I said, man, what they doing? He said, oh, it's no problem. And there was a couple ladies with him. He said, that's the community. He said, this is bath time. It was a time of day where they took all the kids to this little puddle that had a spigot. And he said, that's where they bathed at. I said, they don't have running. He said, no, everybody bathes right there. They were literally bathing their children out in a field like I am right now. Except it was a dirt field and there was 0 trees. And all you saw was the little children bathing. And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He said, see, this is very poor section of town. And I thought what we were doing ministry work in Matamoros was poor. Nah, this was the next level poor. We go to this house where he wants me to pray for somebody. Let me explain something. Where I was at was so poor that it made the projects in New Orleans look like Malibu, California. That's how utterly desolate and poor these huts were, that were literal stone, bricked, you know what I mean? Cinder block, bricks stacked on top of each other with rusted tin roofs. There were dogs everywhere. Perro, right? Is that how you say dog? Perro is dog, gato is cat. There was perro all over. I could be wrong, but there were dogs all over. And there was dog poop all over the street. And this place was so poor and it was so open, like an open desert, that I wondered what the dogs ate. And it literally brought the meaning of dog eat dog to my mind. I said, I bet these dogs are eating each other as these dogs pass away. And when we got out the car, there was literally dog dung everywhere. Stepping around landmines of dog dung where kids played soccer. That's right. The kids were playing soccer everywhere. Like the little babies who were like 6 and under were around that spigot, all taking baths. The older kids, like 13 and up, were all in the field playing soccer as dogs ran around in dust and they were dodging poop bombs everywhere. I'm like, man, this is some brutal stuff. There ain't no park. You know, this is the real Mexico. This is where it's happening at. Dudes walking around with machetes. But there's something I want to share with you that I remember years and years later. I remember Jesse James. Not the outlaw Jesse James, but the guy who used to build bikes. That Jesse James. Didn't he used to date Sandra Bullock? I think so. Anyway, there was this reality TV show where the camera crew followed Jesse James, the motorbike builder, and Kid Rock all the way deep down into depths of Mexico and Central America. And the further they got from the U.S., the less and less people knew who they were, nor did the people care. And I remember they were being down there, and there was a bunch of people who surrounded them because they were on these nice hogs, these nice custom-built choppers, and the people were all smiling and everything. And Kid Rock was kind of like, man, we're like stars down here. And I remember Jesse James said, man, I don't even think these people really know who we are. And the reality was, the people didn't know who they are, because when I was only an hour and a half south of Matamoros, Mexico, in this little poor section of hut-built homes, they thought I was a superstar. You couldn't tell them people I was actual superstar from America, because that's the way they treated me. That's the way they saw me. Actually, it was even worse than that. So me and my new Mexican friend park in this lot, this dusted lot, and there's this little home, and it's not even cinder blocks. It's an old vehicle, an old car that's completely gutted out. And the seats of the car are sitting in front of the car. And he says, this is my friend's house. I said, your friend's house? He said, yeah. He got a couple groceries that he brought with us on the trip, and he grabbed them and put them in a bag. He said, grab these. I said, all right. We get out. I don't see nobody. It's literally just an old car with some car seats and looks like some old sheets all on the ground. And all of a sudden, you see this dude who looks like a skeleton. The dude was literally laying on one of the car seats, and he was so skinny that I did not notice him. He gets up almost like a real zombie from the TV show The Walking Dead. That's what he looked like, except this dude was alive. And I'm looking like, is this real? And he smiles. Hola. And my friend says, hola, ¿cómo estás? And they start talking Spanish. And he says, I just told him you came here to pray for him. And I said, all right, cool. The dude reaches underneath the old seat that he was sleeping on, car seat, and pulls out a Bible that's in Spanish. And he starts reading scripture in Spanish. And all of a sudden he starts weeping and praising God in Spanish. And I said what he's saying, and as it's being translated, I said, I don't need to pray for him. He needs to pray for me. He should be praying for me. This dude's real. He was translating. He said the dude told him in Spanish that he's the most blessed person in the world, that God has given him everything he needs. He ain't had a shirt on. He looks like he ain't had a bath since the 1970s. And I was there to pray for him. I said, can he pray for me? And I had that dude pray for me. Yeah, of course, I said a little prayer for him. But he spoke more into my life. He said, all right, our next trip. And when he gave the dude the little bag, it was like 2 canned goods of beans with 1 fresh water. This dude don't got no fresh water. He was so happy and so appreciative. He wasn't complaining. Ain't no welfare over there. And so the next house we went to, he said, these are my good friends. It's a little better house than the other one that we just left from, where the dude was living on top of an old car seat. This one was actually cinder blocks and stucco with a tin roof. And we walked inside, and they actually had an old TV with extension cords. They actually had power in this house. And it was the only one around, like literally like an acre or so away from it. There was nothing else. And he said, yeah, these are considered rich people here. I said, rich? The floor was dirt. Anyway, when I go in, the man's sitting in a wheelchair and his daughter's taking care of him. And she's a nice lady, and she's speaking all kind of stuff. And he says, they believe that you can pray for him and heal him. I said, pray for this dude and heal him? I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm fresh out of prison 2 years ago. I wasn't even certain I should come here. Now my God is checking me. Man, what am I doing out here in Mexico on this missions trip? I'm not equipped for this, not spiritually. I don't have that type of belief. They expected me to do what Peter and Paul did in the New Testament, to lay hands on this dude and heal him. He's going to get up and walk. And I prayed for him. He had sores, boils all over his face, like leprosy in the Bible. This dude literally had pores of boils, and his daughter was taking care of him. And she had a couple sores on her, so she probably caught what he caught. And he said, pray for him. And I was thinking to myself, should I put my hand on this dude? And the pastor was translating back and forth. He said, they believe that you have the power to heal them. That you are a man that God sent here. And I love Jesus. I love God. But I wasn't there. And so I laid my hand on this man. I went against what I felt, that I was somebody special who shouldn't touch somebody who was infected with whatever it was he was infected with. And I prayed for him, and I wept and I cried when I left. And I remember going back after I left from that trip, and I had an epiphany that my life was good. My life was special, that God spared me, even though I did almost 10 years in prison. I didn't want to complain no more. I had to get busy living, because these people were busy living and not complaining in their harsh conditions. And when I drove back, after experiencing what I experienced in that poor, dilapidated, beat up, dusty town where dogs eat dogs and kids take baths in spigots and puddles and dudes walk around with machetes, the cartel members driving in the trucks didn't seem so scary no more. See, I wasn't worried about them no more. I was worried about what I needed to do with my life to make myself better and a better believer. How come I had so little faith that I could make a difference in this man's life by praying for him, yet he believed? See, I was ineffective. And that's why when I came back from that trip, I got busy with God. I laid my life down at the altar. I did some things. I did some inner work, some inner searching, some soul searching, some mental searching. And it was a good moment for my life. And I made it back. I survived the 50 cal in the face. I think it was for me. God wanted to show me some things. And I'm sharing that with y'all on the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. Man, let's get this. Battle. Sing with me, sing for the years, sing for the laughter, sing for the tears. Sing with me just for today, maybe tomorrow the good Lord will take you away.